Hi there. Welcome back to Haunting Vales. Tonight, we follow Poirot into a case where silence speaks louder than words, and a single footprint tells a story of betrayal. On a quiet staircase, one last step was taken, a step that should never have been made. The trail ends with a single print, vanishing into the unknown, leaving Poirot to wonder. Whose foot marked the way to murder? This is the last footprint on the stairs, a Hercule Poirot mystery. And before we climb further into the shadows, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because more chilling mysteries await, only here on Haunting Vales. Chapter 1. The Uneasy House. It was late in the season, the kind of autumn evening when London seemed to exhale mist and melancholy in equal measure. The lamps along Whitehall glimmered like pale sentinels through the haze, and the click of carriage wheels over wet stones echoed faintly as Hercule Poirot sat in the warmth of his rooms, meticulously straightening a small pile of correspondence. Every letter, every scrap of paper, must lie precisely aligned. Such was the order of Hercule Poirot's little world. On this particular evening, one letter had disturbed that perfect order. The envelope was heavy, cream-colored, and addressed in a hurried yet elegant hand. It lay apart from the others, waiting for his inspection. Poirot's fingers lingered over it before he slid it open with a silver knife. Inside, the words seemed to tremble from the page. Monsieur Poirot, there is something most distressing occurring in my household. I beg of you, come at once. It is not yet murder, though heaven knows it might become so if the shadows in this house continue to thicken. Yours in earnest hope, Evelyn Harwood. Poirot read the letter twice, perhaps 3 times, his green eyes narrowing with that peculiar gleam Hastings knew so well. A cry for help, Poirot? Asked Hastings, who had been standing by the window, his silhouette cut against the fading light. Perhaps, mon ami, Poirot murmured, placing the letter delicately upon the table. Or perhaps merely the cry of the nerves. But the words, they are not without weight. Not yet murder. Eh bien, that is a phrase which demands attention. Hastings came forward, frowning. And you mean to answer it? Mais naturellement. When a lady writes thus, it is not for nothing. We shall go tonight. Tonight, Hastings exclaimed. But surely, Poirot lifted a finger. No, no, my dear Hastings. A house of shadows must not be left until morning. We must see it in its uneasy hour. That is when the truth peeps out timidly from behind the curtain of deceit. Hastings sighed, accustomed by now to such pronouncements, and went off to pack their things. Poirot, meanwhile, tidied the letter away and prepared himself for what promised to be a most interesting evening. The Harwood residence stood in Surrey, a vast country house of pale stone, its grand staircase and tall windows gleaming faintly in the moonlight when they arrived. The carriage passed through iron gates and rolled along a drive lined with whispering elms. Clouds drifted across the moon, and in their shifting light the house appeared not so much welcoming as watchful. The butler met them at the door, a thin, pale man whose voice barely rose above a whisper. He conducted them through echoing corridors where the carpets muffled every step until at last they entered the drawing room. There, Evelyn Harwood awaited them. She was a woman of middle years, elegant in bearing though her face bore signs of care. She clasped Poirot's hands with unexpected strength. Mr. Poirot, she said, thank heaven you came. I feared you might refuse such a vague request. Poirot bowed slightly. Madam, the vaguest of requests are often those most in need of answers. She gestured toward the fire, where Hastings and Poirot seated themselves. You must forgive me for speaking at once. I have little patience left. There are disturbances, not thefts, not assaults, but something that unsettles all who live here. At night we hear steps, and when we search, we find nothing. And then there is the footprint. Ah, said Poirot, his eyes sharpening. The footprint. Yes, always on the same stair on the upper landing. A single mark, as though pressed into dust or ash. The housemaids swear they clean it away, yet it reappears the next evening. A large, heavy print. And yet, monsieur, there is no one in this house whose shoe it could be. Always the same place. Yes, always. Poirot stroked his mustache. A footprint that will not depart. Très intéressant. Tell me, madame, who lives here with you? My son Charles, she said, and his fiancée, Margaret Lane. My brother, Colonel Harwood, has been staying these past weeks. There are servants, of course, but they are long in my employ. None could be responsible. Hastings, leaning forward, asked, "And you fear what exactly?" Evelyn's hands trembled slightly. "I fear the past. This house has not always been free of tragedy, Captain Hastings. Perhaps you have read of it in the papers years ago." Poirot nodded gently. "The Harwood case. Yes, a death most mysterious, never solved. But, madame, shadows of the past, they do not walk by themselves. There's always a foot inside the shoe." Her eyes widened at his words, and Poirot inclined his head. "Fear not. We shall see what is hidden. We shall shine the little light of Hercule Poirot." That evening, supper was served in the dining hall, a cavernous room where portraits of stern ancestors looked down upon the table. Poirot observed them all closely as the meal progressed. Charles Harwood was a handsome young man, but restless. His fingers drummed against the table. His gaze shifted too often. His laugh, when it came, was loud but hollow. Margaret Lane, his fiancée, was delicate, her beauty marred only by a nervous habit of glancing toward doors and windows as though expecting some intrusion. Colonel Harwood, the brother, was red-faced and stiff, his every word clipped as though issued on parade. He eyed Poirot with suspicion, clearly unimpressed by the foreign detective. Poirot ate with delicacy, every gesture precise. Yet his mind was busy. He remembered the mysterious affair at Styles, where appearances had deceived so easily, and the murder of Roger Ackroyd, where the truth had lain closer than any had dared suspect. He had learned long ago, in every house, unease comes not from walls but from hearts. When at last the meal ended, Evelyn led them upstairs. The staircase dominated the hall, a grand flight of stone steps carpeted in crimson. The landing above stretched into shadow. "There," she whispered, pointing, and indeed there it was. A footprint, large, heavy, pressed against the crimson runner as though some man had stepped there with deliberate force. Yet before and after, the carpet was spotless. A solitary mark, standing in defiance of reason. Poirot bent low, his eyes gleaming. He measured the length, the breadth. He traced its outline with a finger. "Curious," he murmured. "There is no dust here, and yet it is dust that has left this mark. No trail leads to it. No trail departs from it. One footprint alone, as if the man appeared only to step once, then vanish." Hastings shivered. "It doesn't make sense, Poirot." "Non, mon ami. It is not. That is why it is so perfect." Poirot rose, his mustache bristling with satisfaction. "The stage is set. The actors are here. The curtain will rise, and we shall see what play unfolds." He glanced around at the assembled faces, Evelyn pale with fear, Charles restless, Margaret anxious, the Colonel grim. Poirot's eyes lingered on each in turn, as though committing their expressions to memory. And somewhere, deep within the uneasy house, a secret stirred, waiting for discovery. Chapter 2. Shadows on the Staircase. The night in the Harwood residence seemed longer than any Hastings could remember. The house, with its high ceilings and echoing passages, felt heavy with silence, and yet not quite silent. There were creaks, sighs of old timber, and the faint whisper of curtains shifting where no wind should have entered. After Evelyn Harwood had retired for the night, Poirot requested that he and Hastings be shown to guest rooms near the landing. Hastings was about to remark on the comfort of his chamber when he noticed Poirot placing his valise neatly at the foot of the bed and then pulling a chair to face the corridor. "You mean to sit there all night, Poirot?" Hastings asked incredulously. "But of course. The staircase. Hastings, she will tell us more by night than by day. One must watch with patience, like the fisherman with his line in the water. I suppose I might do the same." "Non, non, mon ami, Poirot said firmly. You must sleep. Tomorrow, I shall need your eyes clear, your head steady. Go sleep well. Leave the shadows to Hercule Poirot." Hastings reluctantly obeyed, though he doubted whether he could sleep in such a house. He left Poirot seated in his neat chair, his silhouette still and composed, facing the corridor with the quiet resolve of a sentinel. Midnight struck. Somewhere in the lower halls, a clock chimed its solemn warning. Poirot sat unmoving, the little gray cells alert, his mind rehearsing what he had observed at supper. The restlessness of Charles, the nervous glances of Margaret, the colonel's stiff disapproval. And then at 12:30 it began. First, a faint creak like weight settling on timber. Then another. Poirot's head turned slightly. From the staircase, a sound came, soft and deliberate, the tread of a foot. Not hurried, not clumsy. A single step, then silence. Another step, closer this time. Poirot rose, his movements noiseless. He slipped into the corridor, his small frame blending into the shadows. His eyes, keen as a cat's, followed the faint shimmer of the staircase ahead. There on the landing, a shape tall and indistinct. It paused, half hidden by the gloom. Poirot strained his gaze, but in that instant, a cloud passed across the moon, and the staircase was swallowed in darkness. When the light returned, the figure was gone. In its place, only the empty stair and the footprint. Poirot bent over it, examining it afresh. The same size, the same outline. And yet, the dust seemed newly disturbed, as though pressed by weight but a moment ago. He straightened, his face calm, though the mustache twitched with satisfaction. Bon, the shadow comes not from the past, but from the present. Already we learn. The next morning at breakfast, Hastings listened intently as Poirot described what he had seen. "You mean to say you saw someone?" Hastings exclaimed. "I saw the outline, yes. Tall, broad-shouldered, perhaps a man. But the face, no. That the shadow kept to itself. What matters is this. The footprint was made anew. But who could it be? Patience, Hastings. Do not gallop to conclusions. We must let the little details reveal themselves." Evelyn Harwood entered, her face pale. She seemed to have slept little. Seeing Poirot, she asked at once, "Well, did you hear them?" "Indeed, madam," Poirot replied gently. "There was a figure upon the stairs last night." And once again, the footprint appeared. Her hand went to her throat. "Then it is true. We are haunted." Poirot shook his head. "Na, madam, do not speak of ghosts. I have seen many strange things in my career, from the mystery of the blue train to death on the Nile, but never have I seen a ghost leave a footprint. This is a man of flesh and blood. The question is, whose?" Later that morning, Poirot requested to speak privately with each member of the household. First came Charles. The young man entered with an air of defiance, though his eyes betrayed unease. "Mr. Poirot," he said, "surely you don't mean to make too much of this nonsense? A footprint on a stair, it could be a trick of the servants. You know how they like to spin tales." Poirot regarded him calmly. "Ah, but you are quick to dismiss, monsieur. Too quick, perhaps because you yourself walk with unease in this house." Charles flushed. "What do you mean by that?" Poirot merely lifted his brows. "Tell me, where were you last night at 12:30? "In my room, of course. I was reading." "Bon. What did you read?" "Some old volume. I forget the title." Poirot's eyes glittered. "A poor memory, monsieur, for one so young." Charles muttered something indistinct and departed in a hurry. Next came Margaret Lane. She entered with timid grace, her hands twisting in her lap. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said kindly, "you are uneasy, yes?" She nodded. "This house, it frightens me. I hear things. I cannot sleep. Tell me, mademoiselle, why do you glance always at the doors and windows? Whom do you fear will enter?" Her eyes widened. I do not know. It is only a feeling, as though someone watches. Perhaps Charles is right. It is all imagination." Poirot leaned forward. "Non, mademoiselle. Shadows come not from imagination, but from truth. When you think of last night, what do you remember?" "I heard something," she whispered. "Footsteps. I was too afraid to open the door." Poirot nodded gravely. "Courage, mademoiselle. The truth, she is never as terrible as the fear." The colonel was last. He marched in, chin high, boots polished, every inch the soldier still. "Now look here, Poirot," he barked. "This is all damned superstition. A footprint, a noise in the night, it's nothing. You're wasting your time." Poirot smiled thinly. "Perhaps. But tell me, mon colonel, did you sleep well last night?" The colonel hesitated. "Aye, well enough." "Bien. And at 12:30, were you in your room?" "Of course I was. Where else would I be?" Poirot tilted his head. "That is the question I ask myself." The colonel's face darkened, but he said nothing further and left with a stiff bow. When the interviews were done, Hastings returned to Poirot's side. "Well, what do you think of them?" Hastings asked eagerly. Poirot spread his hands. "Each is nervous. Each has secrets. But one truth stands clear. The footprint is no accident. It is placed with purpose each night upon the stair. It is a message, mon ami. Someone wishes to remind this household of something long buried." "A message? What kind of message?" Poirot's gaze drifted to the staircase, gleaming faintly in the morning sun. "That, Hastings, is what we must discover. But already, the little gray cells tell me this. The last footprint on the stairs is not the mark of a ghost. It is the mark of guilt." And with those words, the shadows of the house seemed to deepen, as though in answer to his thought. Chapter 3. The Whisper of Betrayal. The house had grown quieter since that restless night when the storm lashed against the windows and left the countryside shrouded in silence. Yet inside the manor, the silence was no balm. It was oppressive, laden with suspicion and the unspoken knowledge that the murderer still walked its corridors. Poirot, with his meticulous neatness, took breakfast alone in the small morning room. His mustaches, waxed to perfection, glistened faintly in the pale light. The coffee before him steamed, yet he drank sparingly, lost in thought. Every now and then he consulted a small notebook, where neat rows of names and facts stood like chess pieces arranged for a match not yet begun. Always, Hastings, Poirot had once declared in the mysterious affair at Styles, it is the psychology that guides the hand. Without motive, there is no crime. Though Hastings was not with him now, the echo of that statement rang within Poirot's mind. Motive. Always motive. And here, in this lonely manor, there were motives aplenty. Lady Ashcombe, the grieving mistress of the house, carried her sorrow like a veil, but behind it Poirot sensed a bitter history with her late husband. The daughter, Clara, young, headstrong, and resentful, seemed at odds with her mother, perhaps over fortune, perhaps over love. And then there was Dr. Willoughby, the family physician, whose calm was almost too measured, whose knowledge of poisons reminded Poirot uncomfortably of cases past. Sad Cypress, appointment with death, the pale horse. But above all, there lingered that footprint, the last footprint on the stairs. Its presence was not merely physical. It had become a symbol, a whisper in the dark, taunting those who dared to question its meaning. Secrets in the air. By mid-morning, Poirot summoned the household to the drawing-room. The assembled party came reluctantly, like actors summoned before an unforgiving audience. Poirot did not sit. Instead, he stood near the fireplace, his small form dominating the room, not by stature, but by the intensity of his gaze. "My friends," he began softly, "we are all united in tragedy, are we not? Yet, it is not tragedy alone that binds us, but truth. There is a truth that walks these halls, and until we unmask it, none of you shall know peace." No one spoke. Clara avoided her mother's eyes. Dr. Willoughby busied himself with a handkerchief, polishing non-existent smudges on his spectacles. Poirot continued, "I ask you each, then, to speak with me privately. One by one, we shall peel back the layers, as one peels the skin of the onion. Beneath, we may find the tears." He turned, gesturing toward Clara. "Mademoiselle, if you would do me the kindness of being first." Clara hesitated, then rose. She walked stiffly, head high, though her hands betrayed a tremor as she clasped them before her. Poirot led her from the room to the study. Clara's confession. The study, dimly lit and scented with leather bindings, was a confessional chamber for the morning. Poirot closed the door gently, then offered Clara a chair. "Now, mademoiselle," he said kindly, "tell me of your father. Tell me of that night." Clara's lips tightened. "You already know. He was strict, cruel even. He never trusted me. And now he's gone. Everyone expects me to weep. But why should I? He never cared for me." Poirot inclined his head. "Bitterness, yes. But bitterness does not make the hand strike, eh? Tell me, did you hear anything upon the stairs?" Clara's eyes flashed. "I heard a voice, soft like a whisper. I thought it was my mother calling me, but when I stepped into the corridor, no one was there. Only the echo. I went back into my room and locked the door. That's all." Poirot regarded her closely. "You are certain it was your mother's voice?" A pause. "I thought so. But perhaps it was something else. Perhaps I imagined it." Poirot let the silence stretch, then said quietly, "Or perhaps it was betrayal, mademoiselle. Betrayal wears many voices." Her eyes widened, but she said no more. Poirot dismissed her gently, but his mind ticked on. The doctor's knowledge. Next came Dr. Willoughby. The man entered briskly, his expression calm, almost overly so. He adjusted his tie, took the chair offered, and folded his hands. "Monsieur Poirot, I must ask," he began, "do you truly believe there was foul play?" Sir Edmund suffered from a weak heart. A sudden collapse, perfectly possible. Poirot raised a finger. "Possible, yes. Probable? None. I have seen sudden deaths. Doctor, in cards on the table, in dumb witness, in the murder on the Orient Express. Always there is the little detail, the thing out of place. Here it is the footprint. Tell me, doctor, did you climb those stairs that night?" The physician stiffened. I was in my room, reading. I heard nothing." Poirot leaned forward. "But you are a man of science. You know the effects of digitalis, of morphine, of strychnine. You know how easily death may masquerade as accident. And yet you speak only of natural causes. What?" The doctor's eyes narrowed. "Because I will not fan the flames of hysteria. This family has suffered enough." Poirot smiled gently. "Or perhaps, doctor, you protect yourself. We shall see." Lady Ashcombe's silence. Finally, Lady Ashcombe herself. Draped in mourning black, she seemed fragile, a relic of faded beauty. Her eyes were rimmed with red, yet within them Poirot detected not only grief but something harder, steel, perhaps, or guilt. "Madam," he said softly, "you heard a sound that night?" She nodded faintly. "Yes, a creak upon the stair. I thought it was Edmund returning late, but when I looked out, there was nothing." "Nothing," Poirot repeated. "And yet the footprint was there. Tell me, madam, have you enemies in this house?" Her lips trembled. "Not enemies, but secrets, yes. Edmund, he was not a faithful man. He made enemies of those closest to him. Even me." Her voice broke, and for a moment she pressed a handkerchief to her eyes. Poirot waited patiently. When she spoke again, her tone was lower, urgent. "Monsieur Poirot, whatever you uncover, do not destroy Clara. She is young, impetuous. She may have done foolish things, but she is my daughter. Spare her." Poirot bowed his head slightly. "Madam, I spare no one. The truth, it must speak, even if it whispers of betrayal." Her face went pale. She rose swiftly and left, the door closing with a hollow thud. The whisper grows louder. That afternoon, Poirot paced the garden paths, hands behind his back, mustaches quivering in the breeze. The autumn air was sharp, the leaves underfoot brittle. His mind whirled. Betrayal. Always betrayal. Between husband and wife, between parent and child, between physician and patient. Somewhere in this web lay the hand that had struck. He recalled the murder of Roger Ackroyd, that most cunning of betrayals. He thought of peril at End House, where appearances deceived. He remembered death on the Nile, where love itself turned traitor. Betrayal was the common thread, and it ran deep here as well. The last footprint on the stairs was not merely a clue. It was the symbol of a final act of treachery. Someone had climbed that staircase with intent, leaving behind not only a mark upon the carpet, but upon the fate of them all. Evening confrontation. That evening, Poirot called once more upon the drawing room. The fire crackled. The storm had passed, leaving the air heavy and still. "My friends," Poirot began, "the time comes when the whisper must be spoken aloud. There was betrayal in this house. One among you betrayed not only Sir Edmund, but the trust of all gathered here. The footprint cries it out. The walls themselves echo it." Lady Ashcombe shuddered. Clara gripped the arms of her chair. Dr. Willoughby merely folded his hands. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "I do not yet reveal all, but know this. The murderer walks among us, cloaked in silence. Soon, the cloak shall be torn away. Until then, beware, for betrayal breeds fear, and fear may drive one to strike again." The silence that followed was long, taut, unbearable. Outside, a single owl cried into the night, its call like a lament. Inside, no one dared breathe too deeply, lest the whisper of betrayal become a scream. Chapter 4. The Footprint Revealed. The morning dawned pale, a reluctant light creeping across the windows of Ashcombe Manor as though the sun itself hesitated to touch the house with warmth. Poirot rose earlier than usual, his order and routine unshaken, yet his manner suggested a man upon the brink of revelation. His mustaches quivered as he dressed with meticulous care, every button aligned, every crease smoothed. In the hall, a hush prevailed. Servants moved like shadows, speaking in whispers, for tension gripped the household. It was not grief alone. It was the tightening of a noose, unseen yet felt by all. Someone among them bore the secret of murder, and that secret was poised to burst. Poirot paused at the bottom of the grand staircase, his gaze fixed upon the spot where the footprint had been found. The carpet showed no trace now, the fibers brushed and cleaned. Yet in Poirot's mind, the mark remained indelible, a symbol of treachery. He bent slightly, tracing the air with one finger. It was like in the ABC murders. He murmured to himself, where the clue lies not in what is there, but in what is meant to be seen. A footprint, yes, but whose? And why here upon this stair, in this house where all claim innocence? By mid-morning, Poirot called everyone once again to the drawing room. Lady Ashcombe entered first, pale and tightly composed. Clara followed, restless, her eyes darting nervously. Dr. Willoughby came last, his stride firm, his expression carefully blank. Poirot remained standing, his small frame commanding the space as though it were a courtroom and he the sole judge. He allowed silence to stretch until the weight of it bore down upon each of them. "My friends," he began softly, The time for concealment is passing. Last night, I spoke of betrayal. Today, I speak of proof. The footprint, that last footprint upon the stairs, it is the voice of the truth. You may try to silence it, but Hercule Poirot, he listens. No one moved. The fire crackled, the clock ticked. Poirot continued. Each of you has lied to me. Ah, do not protest. Mais oui, the little lies, they slip out like snakes in the grass. But the lies, they do not escape my notice. And soon, they will betray their master. He turned suddenly to Clara. Mademoiselle, you said you heard your mother's voice in the corridor. Your mother herself swore she was in her chamber at that hour. One of you is mistaken, or one of you lies. Clara flushed. Lady Ashcombe stiffened. Poirot let the tension hang before he turned his gaze upon the doctor. And you, Dr. Willoughby, you speak of natural death, yet your knowledge of poisons is vast. Why deny the possibility of murder unless it serves you to do so? The doctor's face remained calm, but his hand clenched upon the armrest of his chair. Poirot spread his hands. We are at the moment of truth. The footprint, it belongs to someone in this very room. I shall show you. Poirot requested the housemaid fetch a tray of flour, fine and white, usually kept for baking. The maid obeyed, wide-eyed and trembling. Poirot set the tray upon the floor near the staircase. Observe, he said, when one walks through the flour, one leaves a mark. But it is not merely a shape, no. It is a confession. The length, the width, the weight it bears, all speak of the one who leaves it. He invited each person in turn to step into the tray. Clara hesitated, then placed her foot down. Small, delicate, narrow. Lady Ashcombe followed, her step lighter than expected, graceful even in grief. Finally, Dr. Willoughby, his footprint was broad, the heel pressed deep from the weight of his stance. Poirot compared each to the sketch he had drawn of the original footprint. He tapped it with a finger. Regardez. It is neither the small foot of Mademoiselle, nor the elegant step of Madame. It is heavy, firm, the step of a man accustomed to standing long hours. It is the footprint of Dr. Willoughby. The doctor rose, his face blanching. This is absurd, he snapped. I never climbed those stairs that night. Your methods are theatrics, nothing more. Poirot only smiled faintly. Ah, but theatrics, they reveal the truth. You were upon the stairs, and you lied. Clara gasped. Lady Ashcombe pressed a hand to her mouth. The doctor's composure wavered. Poirot's eyes glittered, relentless. Why then deny it? Poirot asked softly. Why pretend you did not ascend? You are the physician trusted, relied upon. And yet, you betray that trust. You were upon the stairs at the very hour Sir Edmund died. What took you there, doctor? Dr. Willoughby struggled for words. I heard a sound. I thought perhaps Sir Edmund required my assistance. When I reached the landing, I saw nothing. I returned at once. Poirot shook his head. Non. The truth is more tangled. You went to Sir Edmund's chamber. You carried with you knowledge, perhaps even a draught, a potion, and you administered it. But why? That is the question. Poirot withdrew a paper from his pocket. I have here records obtained from Sir Edmund's solicitor. Did you think, doctor, that his affairs were secret? Mais non. Sir Edmund intended to alter his will. He meant to cut your fee, to sever your long arrangement. You were to lose not only income, but influence. Such a man does not forgive lightly. The doctor's face drained of color. Those were rumors, nothing more. Poirot's voice sharpened. Rumors? No, facts. And facts, they are dangerous when one hopes to conceal murder. Clara spoke suddenly, her voice trembling. So it was you. You killed him. I knew it wasn't mother, I knew. Poirot raised a hand. Patience, mademoiselle. Do not leap. There is more to consider. The doctor, yes, he climbed the stairs. But the whisper, the betrayal, it may yet reach deeper. That evening, Poirot retired early to his chamber. But he did not sleep. He sat in a chair by the fire, fingers steepled, eyes distant. The house lay silent, yet Poirot's mind hummed with questions. The footprint pointed to the doctor. Yes, but the whispers, the lies, they pointed elsewhere. Lady Ashcombe's plea to spare her daughter. Clara's claim of hearing her mother's voice. These were threads, tangled, leading not only to the doctor but to the family itself. It is as in Murder on the Orient Express, Poirot murmured to himself. The footprint tells us who was there. But motive, psychology, that tells us why. And until we know why, the truth is incomplete. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Tomorrow, I shall gather them all. And tomorrow, the footprint shall speak its final truth. The next day dawned gray and heavy with mist. The household moved as though under a spell, each step cautious, each glance filled with dread. Whispers followed Poirot wherever he went, servants muttering, Clara pacing the halls, Lady Ashcombe cloistered in her room. The doctor avoided all eyes. Once, Poirot passed him in the corridor, and their gazes met. The doctor's defiant, Poirot's unreadable. It was a duel fought in silence, but Poirot knew the balance had shifted. That evening, as the lamps were lit and shadows deepened, Poirot summoned them all once more to the drawing-room. His voice was calm, but the air about him vibrated with certainty. "My friends," he said, "the time has come. We have lived in shadows, in whispers, in lies. But Hercule Poirot, he does not remain in the dark. He brings the light. Tonight, I reveal the truth of the last footprint upon the stairs." He paused, his eyes sweeping over their faces. Lady Ashcombe, pale and tight-lipped. Clara, tense and wide-eyed. Dr. Willoughby, rigid, defiant, his jaw clenched. "The footprint was yours, Doctor," Poirot declared. "That is fact. But the act, the murder, that, my friends, is still more cunning. It is betrayal layered upon betrayal. And tomorrow I shall prove it." The room shuddered under the weight of his words. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Lady Ashcombe closed her eyes. The doctor exhaled sharply, like a man awaiting a verdict. Poirot turned toward the fire, his silhouette sharp against the glow. The whisper of betrayal becomes, at last, the voice of justice. Chapter 5, Poirot's Final Curtain. The household gathered once more in the drawing-room, though now the air was thick with something beyond tension. Fear, perhaps, or resignation. Outside, the dawn light had begun to touch the horizon, yet inside the great house shadows lingered as though reluctant to depart. Evelyn sat stiffly in her chair, her hands trembling on her lap. Charles hovered near the mantelpiece, pale and restless. Margaret's eyes darted about the room, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. The colonel stood with his back to the group, staring through the window into the paling night. Poirot entered with his usual composure, immaculate as ever, his mustache waxed to perfection, his patent leather shoes gleaming. He carried with him a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. Hastings followed, his expression grave, but his eyes glinted with the anticipation he always felt when Poirot was about to deliver his denouement. "My friends," Poirot began, his voice calm, measured, carrying the weight of finality. "At last we reach the end. The phantom who has haunted your nights, who has left upon your stair the mark of fear, he shall haunt you no more." No one spoke. Evelyn leaned forward, her lips parting in an unspoken question. Poirot set the parcel upon the table and unwrapped it carefully. Inside lay a block of wood, fitted with a sole of rubber, cut to resemble the imprint of a heavy shoe. "The last footprint," Poirot said softly, "was made not by the tread of man, but by this. A false sole, fashioned with precision, pressed into the carpet night after night. A child's trick, but most effective, for it preyed upon memory and fear." Charles drew a sharp breath. Margaret shuddered. The colonel turned, his face hard, his eyes cold. Evelyn raised a hand to her lips. "But who?" she whispered. Who would torment us so? Poirot's gaze lingered on each of them in turn. He let the silence stretch until it seemed the walls themselves leaned forward to listen. "Consider," he said at last, "who among you gains from such terror? Madame Evelyn, you suffer most, your heart wrung with the memory of your husband's fall upon these very stairs. To frighten you is to weaken you. To weaken you is to unsettle the affairs of this household, to place another in command. Non, do not protest. The truth, she is simple." He turned sharply, his eyes fastening on Charles. "Monsieur Charles, it is you." Charles staggered back a step, his face whitening. "That's absurd," he cried. "You can't possibly believe I—" "Mais oui," Poirot interrupted, his tone cutting. "You sought to frighten your stepmother into madness, to drive her from the house. For years you have chafed under her authority, under the control of the estate that you felt should be yours. The footprint, the shadow, the fear, these were your tools. But you forgot, monsieur, that Hercule Poirot sees what others overlook. He lifted the wooden sole. This I found concealed in your chamber. The ink of polish upon it is still fresh from last night. And there is more. Hastings, the paper." Hastings produced a folded sheet from his pocket and handed it to Poirot, who spread it upon the table. "An account," Poirot explained, "from a cobbler in the village. For rubber cuttings, purchased by you not a month past. The details are precise. The hand is your own." Charles's protests faltered. His lips moved, but no sound came forth. Margaret buried her face in her hands. Evelyn gave a soft cry of anguish. Poirot's voice gentled. "Monsieur Charles, you're not the first in this family to let resentment curdle into cruelty. Years ago, your father's fall upon these stairs. Ah, yes, you remember. It was ruled an accident, but suspicion lingered. You wished to revive that suspicion, to conjure the ghost of guilt, to unsettle Madame Evelyn, to claim for yourself what you believed was denied you. But such plots, they unravel when touched by the little gray cells." The colonel spoke at last, his voice low, iron-hard. "You fool, Charles, to torment your own stepmother, to defile the memory of your father with this charade." Charles flung up his head. "He never cared for me. She never cared for me. I was always second, always lesser. I only wanted what was mine, what should have been mine." Poirot sighed, the sound tinged with sorrow. "So many crimes are born not of hunger, nor of need, but of envy. It is a poison, mon cher. It blinds, it corrodes, it consumes. And in the end, it destroys." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Evelyn's muffled sobs. Poirot replaced the wooden sole in its paper, folded it neatly, and handed it to the colonel. "I leave the matter in your hands. Justice, she will take her course." Then, more softly, to Evelyn, "Madam, the haunting is ended. The stair is only a stair, no more. You may walk upon it in peace." Evelyn reached for his hand, her eyes wet with gratitude. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. You have freed us from a nightmare." Poirot inclined his head. "It is my duty, madam, and perhaps also my gift. For where others see shadows, Hercule Poirot sees patterns. And where there is pattern, there is always truth." Later, as dawn broke fully and the first birds sang in the garden, Hastings walked with Poirot along the gravel path outside. "Well," Hastings said, shaking his head, "I must say, old chap, it was a queer business. Footprints made with a stamp. Who would have thought it?" Poirot smiled faintly. "It is always so, Hastings. Men wrap their schemes in shadows, in theatrics, in the trappings of the supernatural. But beneath, the truth is always simple, always human." He tapped a finger to his temple. "One must only employ the little gray cells." Hastings chuckled. "Still, you must admit it was rather a dramatic case. Footsteps in the night, ghosts on the stairs. It would make a fine story. Perhaps even Agatha could use it. Perhaps," Poirot said with a glimmer of amusement, "though I think she already has too many stories of murder in country houses. N'est-ce pas?" The murder of Roger Ackroyd, Peril at End House, the mystery of the blue train. Ah, toujours, she will not run short of ideas. And together they walked on, the house receding behind them, the shadows lifted at last. As Andrew's voice fades, let the audience linger in the silence, the tension broken at last, the truth laid bare. Then, my friends, if you enjoyed unraveling the secrets of the last footprint on the stairs, step further into the world of Hercule Poirot. Subscribe now to Haunting Vale for more mysteries, more shadows, more truths uncovered. Turn on the bell so you never miss when the next puzzle is revealed. And remember, every mystery leaves behind a footprint, but only the sharpest eyes can see where it truly leads.